Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. And for all my continued followers, I want to say thank you. And this is an opinion-based video channel where I try to open your eyes and ears up to some of the travails and tribulations that take place throughout our cities, our states, our country, and sometimes around the world. And I got a story straight out of Detroit. And this is all about, I say it all the time, that life is about the journey and not the destination. And what does that mean? That means that if you can go through 30 years of doing everything right and on the outside being an exemplary professional and individual and make one mistake that can turn your entire character into something negative and be completely character assassinated. And that will be the end of your legacy. So life is a journey, meaning it's a continuum of trying to be successful and to be on a path of learning constantly. The day you stop learning is the day you start dying. And this one is about a Detroit principal. Here again, for many, many years, had been doing well, had even won a $500,000 Ellen DeGeneres Prize for his school. He had been all over the news about the great things that he was doing, but guess what? This principal got his hand caught in the cookie jar at the demise of his own students. So he won the $500,000 Ellen DeGeneres Prize because evidently he was on all outward appearances. He was doing all these great things for his kids at his school. But after winning that prize, evidently he had been secretly doing other things that were at the demise of his own students. So let's get into what actually happened. And I guess this guy forgot that all of the national eyeballs, city eyeballs of Detroit, the state of Michigan, once he won that $500,000 in that Ellen DeGeneres Prize, that everybody was going to be looking at him. And I guess he thought that he could continue to have this illegal relationship with a vendor and never get caught. And actually he did get caught and sent to prison. So all at the dismantling of his own kids at his school. Here we go. Detroit principal whose school won the Ellen DeGeneres Prize gets 1 year in prison. Let's see what he did. After insisting he was hoodwinked by a crooked businessman and pleading for mercy, Principal Ronald Alexander, the principal whose Detroit school won a $500,000 giveaway on the Ellen DeGeneres show, was sentenced to 1 year in prison for taking kickbacks from a vendor named Norman Shy. So here we go. Principal Alexander, who told the judge he lived for his students and even buried three students out of his own pocket, had asked the judge to keep him out of prison so that he could care for his 87-year-old mother. He argued repeatedly in court that he was a good man who lived a modest life, of which 40 years was dedicated to serving the children of the Detroit public schools. 40 years. Life is a journey, not a destination. So winning that Ellen DeGeneres Prize, he thought that that was his final destination. And it wasn't. It was just the beginning of a new journey. U.S. District Judge Victoria Roberts conceded that he had lived a good life filled with good deeds, but concluded that Principal Alexander couldn't escape prison for taking $23,000 in gift cards and checks from Mr. Shy in exchange for approving his phony invoices for school supplies that were paid but never delivered to the kids. Judge said, "You are not blameless. You had everything in your hands, Roberts told Alexander at sentencing. Mr. Shy did not make you commit a crime. Judge Roberts then reminded Principal Alexander that he had pleaded guilty. She said, despite your guilty plea, it sounds to me that you think you're not guilty of anything, said Roberts, who then quoted Principal Alexander's plea agreement, in which he admitted that he had approved fraudulent invoices for school supplies that were never delivered to Spain Elementary. So these supplies were supposed to be for the kids. They never got there. But he won a $500,000 Ellen DeGeneres prize that was for the kids because he's supposed to have been a person that was all about the children. But secretly, he's taking basic, not bribes, but he was creating fraudulent invoices and pocketing the money. She said, this is verbatim from your Rule 11 plea agreement, Roberts told Principal Alexander. This court and government doesn't have to make anything up. You signed it. But Principal Alexander, who was sentenced in a courtroom packed with his supporters, told a different story, insisting he never stole money from his students. He said that any gift cards or money he received from Mr. Shy were presented as donations. Mr. Shy, he did me wrong, Principal Alexander said with his voice rising. He's a known crook, and he's been doing it for years. Well, if you knew he was a known crook, why did you go into business with him anyway? And you're the one who has everything to lose. You're the principal of this elementary school. You're at the top of the heap of this school. You represent this school not only inside the school, part of the Board of Education, but also for the community. And if you knew he was a crook, why did you do business with him anyway? Principal Alexander also portrayed himself as an altruistic principal who put clothes on needy kids' backs, bought their families' furniture, paid for the funerals of children whose parents were poor, and helped raise the standards at Spain Elementary by drawing attention to its deplorable conditions that led to the $500,000 giveaway on the DeGeneres show, the Ellen DeGeneres show. Nobody knows how bad I feel to have to go out from my job like this, Principal Alexander said. I love this school. I think it's unfair. It's just unfair to me, Your Honor, and I don't deserve it. Principal Alexander was talking about the charges and the possibility of going to prison. He said, I'm sad, I'm hurt, I feel bad, Alexander said. I should be judged by the life I have lived. Judge Roberts took his good deeds into account as Alexander faced 37 to 46 months in prison under his sentencing guidelines. Prosecutors had argued for 19 to 24 months, taking into his account his cooperation. The sentence is not meant to be punitive, but it's probably going to feel that way, Judge Roberts said, stressing the goal of the sentence was to uphold the respect for the law and to deter other principals who may get into bed with vendors like Mr. Shy. So they made an example out of Principal Alexander. Mr. Shy was also charged in the case and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He also has to pay $2.7 million in restitution to Detroit Public Schools. So he's been doing this for a while. That's how much he billed the school district for supplies he never delivered with the help of 12 principals and 1 assistant superintendent, all of whom were charged back in March. He had 12 principals. Think about this, people. Why are our schools falling apart? Our leaders are corrupt. And this is in Detroit. Why are our students, our kids of color in places like Philadelphia, Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, their reading and math scores are 2 grade levels behind where they should be on their state exams. You got the principals that are worried about everything else but teaching these kids and helping them to become honorable adults. Mr. Shy was involved with 12 principals and one assistant superintendent. Alexander, Principal Alexander, is among 4 principals who will be sentenced. Prosecutors sought 7 years for Mr. Shy. His cohort, Clara Flowers, and an assistant superintendent who pocketed $330,000 in kickbacks from Mr. Shy, she got the second toughest sentence, which was 3 years, when she could have gotten nearly 6 under the terms of the plea deal. 2 other principals got less. One got 15 months, the other one got a year. Both of them faced double that under their sentencing guidelines. So there have been more than one principal, up to 12 that have been involved, and there have been 3 or 4 that have been sentenced to 1 to 3 years. And you have an assistant superintendent who stole over $330,000. This gentleman had siphoned off, what does it say? Almost $3 million, $2.7 million. How many years has this been going on? And I'm bringing this to light because this is not only happening in Detroit, this is happening in many of our urban schools. We have a mess going on right now in St. Louis, where the newly elected superintendent from a year ago, she was pushed out here in the last few weeks. She had been hired people from Seattle, brought in like 12 people, giving them exorbitant salaries. She had one young lady that was making over $150,000 who was working from Texas and Seattle and not even coming to St. Louis. This recent superintendent here in St. Louis only was on the job for 1 year and she got pushed out. St. Louis also is having issues with their busing. They lost a contract for the yellow buses to bring kids to and from school. That contract, they had a falling out over that. There's been all kinds of chaos and disruption on how kids are going to get to and from school as we speak. And there's been 3 or 4 other top leaders in the St. Louis public school system, the SLPS, that have resigned and left here just this year. And we're only in October. We got all this chaos and disruption all throughout our cities and our states. School should be a safe haven for kids to learn, to be able to eat, especially poverty-stricken children. That may be their only meal. This is an opportunity for them to spend 6 or 7 hours in a safe place to try to garner an education, leadership skills, maturity development, physical, emotional, psychological. But we have the people at the very top, principals, superintendents, that are so worried about padding their pockets and not taking care of these kids that it is unbelievable. And we wonder, we got too many kids living in fatherless homes in our urban cities. The opioid crisis is at an all-time high. They're coming from dysfunctional homes, and then we're displacing these kids for 6 or 7 hours a day into dysfunctional schools. And we have dysfunctional leaders. This gentleman did not even have the sense to understand that he won $500,000 on a national program, the Ellen DeGeneres Show, and he didn't think that the eyeballs would be on him for the rest of his tenure there. And he thought that he would be able to continue to steal from the Detroit public school system by creating false receipts from a vendor. And there was supposed to be items that the vendor was supposed to be giving to these kids that they never got. And he's padding his pocket. He wins the school $500,000, but he goes to jail for $23,000. I mean, look, the math doesn't add up. And I'm sure they got him for the $23,000. He probably has been doing this for years and years. A lot of these administrators that are stealing from these schools, this is their own little piggy bank. And you got to remember, I did a video a month or 2 ago about a woman in Harvey, Illinois, right outside of Chicago, where she stole over $1 million worth of chicken wings over a number of years and finally got caught and sentenced to like 7 or 9 years in prison. And she was like 64, 65 years old. What are we doing? Same scenario. She was the director of the food service. She had this vendor and she was going about her business, patting her pockets and not caring about these kids. And remember, that was probably their only meal. And that she started that during the pandemic where kids were staying at home. These kids are poor. That might have been their only meal. She stole over $1 million worth of chicken wings. And now this gentleman had fake, phony invoices for school supplies for these poor Detroit inner city kids. And he ends up taking gifts and faking at least $23,000 worth of invoices for supplies that were supposed to go to the kids. And he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Our leaders and our administrators have got to do better. Our teachers are the most important thing that we have in having a vibrant society. We will not have doctors, lawyers, professional athletes if we didn't have teachers. Teachers are just as important as parents, and our administrators should be held to a higher standard and representation. This is unfortunate for this Detroit principal who got his hand caught in the cookie jar and is going to end up doing 1 year in prison based on these phony invoices. Tell me what you think. This has been the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth.